Okay, so we are not here to study Buddhist philosophy and theorize about what it might mean, but to find out something about ourselves. So if we take this point that the mind is unborn, this means also my mind. So each of us here just now, we experience, that is to say, arisings register or display themselves. We hear sounds, movements, colors. Something is happening. If something is happening, there is a mind, because the mind is the knower of what is happening, or the revealer of what is happening. So now we just focus on being present with the mind. And the key point of these 5 questions, which I'll repeat again, is that these questions provide the basic points of identification for the familiar phenomena in the world. Like when something is an object that you can know about, like a motor car. You can know what color it is, how old it is, what the manufacturer is, has it got 2 doors, 4 doors, and so on. So we're looking at color, shape, where it came from, where it is, and how long it's likely to be there. So now there's pressure on diesel cars. So if it's a diesel car, maybe they want to take them off the road before petrol cars because of increased pollution and so on. So we have a frame of interpreting what the status of this phenomena is. And it would be the same if you were looking at potatoes. Some potatoes rot very easily. The growths are already coming in them. They don't last well from the old season. So this is how we make sense of the world. We interpret. This is the sound of the bell in the church. So location, signification, identification. Now that can be applied to any object. So we have a lot of research on the body now and on the functions of the brain. Now all kinds of elaborated machines for investigating and getting more and more information, which is then composed into hypotheses and further testing out. This is how human knowledge is developing. That is to say, we start with the assumption there is something there, and then on the basis of that we investigate what are the qualities of the thing that is there. Now, we have to be very careful, because if you start examining your mind on the basis of the assumption that there is something there, then you can spend a lot of time trying to find evidence that proves that there is something there. This is a kind of bias, what they call a confirmation bias, that you start with a pre-existing view and you kind of bend the information to fulfill it. So without prejudice, how is the mind? How is it? I'm aware that things are showing. How does the mind show this? That is to say, does it show it like a torch, like a big searchlight, like a telescope? What is it doing? Is the mind, that is to say, does the mind stand apart from what is arising and observe it? Does it reveal it in the manner of a hologram? Let's look. It's our mind. Our mind has been here certainly since we were born, and according to the teachings from well before then. So the mind is here. So, does it have a color? Does it have a shape? Is it big? Is it small? Does it come from someplace? To me. Here is I'm present with my mind. Is it resting inside what I call my body? Is it outside my body? Is it neither inside nor outside? Does it go anywhere? Does the mind vanish? So it is our mind. We should be able to find out a bit more about it. So this is the function of the meditation, is to bring us closer to the mind itself. So that's what we do now. We sit in the usual relaxed way. And as you settle into that, you become aware that experience is arising. Some of the experience looks like object, some of the experience looks like subject. It's arising and passing. And it's revealed. So subject and object, they're like two dancers on a stage, they're doing a pas de deux. The bodies are moving, there's an interaction, and a particular form is arising. But you have the stage. The stage is the mind. So if you fuse into the subject side, then you find an object, because subject and object are born together. But if you relax and you let subject arise and pass, and object arise and pass, and you see the lack of inherent self-nature in both, then you start to see the dynamic waves of appearance within this luminous space of the mind. Okay, so now, how is this mind? So that's what we want to investigate. Any questions about that before we begin? Bravo. Okay. So clearly when we are sitting, there's a lot arising. Sometimes it's clear, sometimes not so clear, it might be fresh, it might be a bit sleepy. Don't interfere with the content of the mind. Because if you interfere with it and manipulate it, you build one on top of the next. By allowing the mind to flow however it does, even if it seems cloudy and dull, the intrinsic impermanence or flow or self-liberation of these phenomena becomes apparent. And that makes it obvious, well, that couldn't be my mind because it vanished. So you might have some sensation in your body, some feeling, oh yes, my mind is in my head. If you just stay with that, you don't have to believe it or disbelieve it. You just allow it to be there like a hypothesis and see what happens. And if it vanishes, then it's a temporary content of the mind. It's not the mind itself. So we do this again and again and again until you see that the mind and the content of the mind is not the same and yet inseparable, like the reflection in the mirror. You can't just empty out the mind to find the mind itself. You can't just sort of take all the clouds out of the sky. Because then you have a blue sky, but who says the sky is blue? Blue is also just a color which arises due to colors and circumstance. The nature of space is clear. The mind is clear, but full of movement. The more we stay with the movement shows directly the emptiness of the mind. It's not that you have to do some logical inference, oh, because of this, on the basis of that, then I can decide this is how it really is. That's just going to be another concept structure that you've cooked up. But if you're sitting with the movement, the more relaxed, that is unagitated and uninvolved, ungrasping the subject side is, the more subject arises and passes and object arises and passes within the mind. You hear a noise outside, and that noise, is it outside the mind coming into the mind. The noise is there due to a car or the bells or someone moving. I'm here, the noise is coming from there to here. Oh, there's a car. Now, is the car outside my mind or inside my mind? If I rely on my ordinary rational interpretation, clearly, oh, it's not inside my mind. That's because my mind's inside me. That's what my mind is. It's a bit of me. But if we relax out of that interpretation, the sound arises in the mind. Oh, so maybe the mind's not inside or outside. So this is what we have to look at again and again and again until we have that clarity. It's not a theory, it's not a dogma that you have to make your own by repeating it again and again. Dogmatic solutions are no solution at all. We want to see directly the content of the mind always vanishes, but there is always content present with the mind. The mind is unchanging presence, but it's not a thing, and it's not a thing. Okay, so we do some more practice then. We start to see the familiar moves that occur in the practice. We can be merging into what is arising. We can be seemingly seeing and judging what is arising, trying to avoid what is arising. It doesn't really matter which of these moves occurs. This is a movement within the mind. So the key thing is, don't react to a movement which has already occurred. It's not a mistake. You don't have to improve it. If you find you're getting heavy and sleepy because there's not so much air and it's a bit warm, then you're just a bit sleepy. So this is an experience which is arising. It shows itself. Maybe you nod, oh, then something else, then something else. No experience is definitive of, as it were, the essence of who you are, because when you look, the essence is empty. We cannot be defined, we cannot be caught. So whenever you find yourself grasping at something and thinking, oh, this is it, just stay present with that and see what happens. So how can I be an ungraspable awareness? Well, it's not really a proper question, because you are an ungraspable awareness. It's more, how can I deny being an ungraspable awareness? That is easily done by pretending that you're not. We are not what we are by making ourselves be something else. So these moves of fusion into what's arising, or judgment, or building patterns, these are all ways of this dance, this between subject and object, catching our attention. We're intrigued, fascinated. And if you're in the ballet and you're watching two dancers moving, you don't really see the stage. You're not even really aware of the space. It's as if the space is the facilitating factor, which is taken for granted, which is not attended to, yet without which these figures wouldn't be moving. So when the subject and object are moving in our mind, we're just, whoa, what's going on? And of course, even to keep that level of observation is difficult, because you fuse into being the subject. Once the mind is moving and you give yourself into it, you think you're having the clarity of observation, but you're tilted towards the object. and then you get wrapped up in it. So where's the space? The movement requires space. Any kind of movement requires space. If you're in the rush hour in a busy train or tram, you can't move. You're packed in with other people. Then half the carriage gets out at the station, and people go, oh, can loosen up. So that's just the fact. You need space to move. So you've got a lot of movement. Must be space. The mind is the space within which the movement is occurring. But again, it's not theory. It's not something. A little bit of analysis clarifies it, but then you have to return into that. Okay. Resting in the space. Not making it, but being with it. It's already there, so we relax into the self-existing or the intrinsic or fundamental quality of the openness of the mind. And we come out of that when we start to construct. Construction is artificial. Construction is adventitious, that is to say, it has a beginning. And construction involves interaction of subject and object. So we can observe this for ourselves. I'm busy making something happening, or I'm busy observing what is happening. Separation of subject and object. But this subject, who is me, vanishes. This subject formation was a temporary home for the ego. It was one of the myriad forms of becoming that the ego identifies with and says, this is me, here I am, undeniable, and then gone. So this is not awareness. This is just the busyness of conceptual elaboration and construction. So again and again, however the mind is, just relaxed and open. Relaxed and open. And when you find yourself merging into the subject, or maybe if there's a strong sound like the church bells, you seem to merge into the object. This is a position taking. This is a polarization. And so you've got a subtle dualizing achieved through fusion. Oh, what's that? You hear some sound. Oh. But because I'm going here with this, everything else is vanished. It's not inclusive. It's not spacious. But the awareness is always open. Everything happens at once. Everything is arising together. Not from here to there, not this first and then that, but all of a piece. All of a piece. Okay, so we do some more sitting.
Can I ask one question? Just about asking, what's the shape, what's the color. Who is asking those questions? How is that non-dual? I don't quite understand how to use it.
Okay, well it's a means for opening up the understanding of non-duality, but of course you're starting from a dualistic position. The key thing is to ask the question in a way which begins with not knowing.
But somebody's asking. Who's asking?
Well, you want to allow it to arise hardly as an asking. Say, for example, you're walking down a little path here, and the blossom is coming out. And you stop. You're sniffing to get more of this. Don't know what the fuck it is, but so you're passive receptive. That is to say, I want this to show itself through me. I'm not looking at it and checking it from some checklist in my mind, but the more, here is the mind, and let it show itself, and then I'll see.
So it's not active asking in any...
It's not active asking, otherwise I'm like a policeman checking it out. Yeah. Where were you on the night of the 22nd? Mm-hmm. Here we are, the mind is here, because we'd be dead if that wasn't the case. So mind is here, stuff is arising in the mind. How is the mind which is here? Because it's here. So you start with the here-ness of it. It's not some foreign invader. It's not something from outer space. This is my mind. In a sense, I am my mind. How am I? Or in another language, who am I? So you're not asking the question as subject to object. You're asking the question, as it were, subject to the most subtle form of subject. So you're inviting the displaying or the unfolding of the mind. Because if you start with your definition, which is what we usually do, we tell the world what it is, and then we prove that by saying, I told you it was an orange, just look, it's an orange. Well, we put the orangeness in the orange. If you do that to your mind, all you do is bind yourself into the endless business of creating interpretations. And sometimes that will happen, and we don't worry because it's just another movement of the mind. So you can't make a mistake doing the practice. It's just that however the mind moves, you wouldn't know if the mind wasn't there. The example we sometimes use is like the moon. The moon has no light. The light of the moon comes from the sun. The sun is awareness. So awareness is the great illuminator, but that light is not directly seen, because if you look at the sun, you go blind. You can't see the sun. You can't see awareness, but you are aware. But you are aware of this. So it looks like the object is the shiny one, because that's what you're aware of. So the light of awareness illuminates the thought, the memory, the feeling, and that's the thing that looks bright, like the moon. So if you're in your habitual object fixation, you click into subject looking at the illuminated object. But where is the source of the illumination? Oh, I see it. So now you've misinterpreted the source of the light. The ego pulls back the lucidity, the clarity, as a personal possession. I understand what is going on, and that thought's gone. That was only a thought. So if you hear the thought and believe the thought in its brightness will make you stupid. Because it's a dull light, it's a dark light. So if we allow the thoughts, however they are, to come and go, and stay calm, patient, open, then we see. Now, in principle, there are no preliminary practices in Dzogchen. There's no particular thing you have to prepare. But clearly, if you've got some understanding of the paramitas, for example, they all help. If you've done any kinds of mindfulness, that helps. A lot of shamatha would help. Any kind of meditation will help, because the more calm and the more present you are, and the less buzzed up you are. So if you're really buzzed up and you have clarity, it doesn't matter. But if you don't have much clarity and you're buzzed up, you probably have to do some kind of adjustment to settle a little bit. And the big problem is always desperation. Who is desperate? Who is needy? Well, it's the ego that needs something to be happening. That's what we looked at in detail this morning. Because the ego has no content of its own. It lives as a thief. It lives as a form stealer. It steals identity. It incorporates what's arising as itself. That's what we see in the meditation. We observe ourselves. I fuse with a thought. As a thought. I don't fuse as a thought as me, but it's me as a thought. That is to say, the subject sense, here I am, I'm hungry. I'm hungry is the thought or the feeling tone of hunger being the pervasive feeling tone, the sensational quality of me at this moment. I am not other than hunger. That is to say, the sensation has become my abode for the moment. I don't know if you saw Terminator 2. Science fiction movies are very, very good for this, because this shape-shifting person comes from the future and he can just take on the form of someone else. So he kills people and becomes them. So it's like that. That's what the ego is doing. The ego says, any port in a storm, I will be whatever is required. It can do that with duplicity, with an intentional, mischievous quality, or it can do it in a very naive quality. But we are hungry. So you see that with a baby. Babies are completely identified with what's arising. When they're crying, they're really crying, and you've got to pick them up. If you don't do that, you get a lot of noise, because they become desperate, because all they have is this primary fusion into the arising sensation. And then you distract them. You comfort them, you sing to them, and then you make some funny noises, and they're out of it. They were in that mood, and then they're out of it. But while they were in it, that was the totality of their lived experience. So that's the same as what we experience in the meditation. When we fuse into something, it is as if this is the totality of me. And then it's gone. Luckily there's another. Luckily there's another. So this is the driving engine of samsara, as we fuse into one and fuse into another, reject another or judge another. We're always standing in relation in this way, moving on moment by moment by moment. So when we're asking the question, if we ask it as a subject to object, we're just feeding into the game, but it's more like a kind of background. Like, say for example, if you imagine you're in the ballet and there are two dancers on the stage, imagine your gaze is tracking their movement, the extension of the limbs, the harmony, the leap, and so on, how the person's being caught. There's something to see in space. So we know how to look at the dancers, but how do you see the space within which the dance is occurring? Because there's nothing to see in that concrete, grasping way, and yet without it, the dancing wouldn't be occurring. So seeing space is really appreciating space. It's a softer thing. You can't apprehend it. There's nothing to hold on to, but you feel the space that they're moving in. Or if you're listening to music, you're hearing sound moving through silence. It's growing in volume, and then it's becoming quieter, and so on. But without, as it were, the background potential of silence, the sound wouldn't have an arena. Silence is the space of sound. So in all these situations, the vehicle, the carrier, the medium, the medium is empty. And the vehicle is a pulsation of energy which is moving through the space of the silence. Yeah? So we want to settle into that, just open. In English, probably open's the simplest word. We just open. And then you observe, I close. I close into aversion or attraction. I close into fusion or waking up. These are pulsations. Okay, we'll do one last short sit, and then we have food. Now, in public places like cinemas, if there's a problem with the electricity and the lights go off, the emergency lighting comes on. This is what happens for us in the practice. When you relax and you open, although on one level we know what we see is always light, and the light is organized by our mental structures and the structuring of our eyes. It's going to be different for a fly or a snake. we still see reds and blues and greens and yellows. And we see them on pillars and paintings on the wall and whatever is right in front of your face. Why is this? Because we have this like emergency cognitive structure, a kind of survival, what's going on, which arises the more you relax. So even though you're relaxing, everything doesn't just dissolve and open into light and sound. There's a kind of residual organizational faculty or facility which keeps kind of stabilizing, pinning things back in place. In the Tibetan tradition, this is compared to in a little valley. When you walk across the grass in the middle of the valley, the ground gets a bit wet and sinks because there's a little stream running under the earth through the water meadow. You don't see it from the outside, but it's always running. And this is the basis of our self-continuity. It's called Santana in Sanskrit, and it's a bit like the band Santana that just goes on and on and on. This is kind of pulsing through. So in Tibetan it's Rangyut, so it means my flow or my continuity. So it's the flow of the stabilizing, organizing, a very subtle form of consciousness that, as it were, keeps identifying what's there. So even though you're not intentionally trying to do it, this is the kind of subtle level, the dullness of the mind, what's called the first of the five poisons, timuk, which is a kind of opacity, opaque, like the windows sometimes you get in toilets where they've done acid to the surface of the glass and you can't see through it. So this is the clarity is sort of broken up slightly, and so you still stay with the felt sense that there are things there. And then on the basis of that, it's very easy to go into liking and not liking and elaboration. So we just stay open. We just stay open. These are karmic traits, these are habits, and they will gradually loosen. And as they loosen, you get the arising of the nyam, these meditation experiences in which you might have no thought at all. So there's no conceptual interpretation. Or you might get dewa, you might get a feeling of happiness. Or you get a particular kind of clarity where the mind seems unobstructed. But these also are transient experiences which are arising and passing. So the key thing is, don't buy into any answer. Don't buy into any form which arises. So in Buddhism, our practice begins with taking refuge. We take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, Guru, Deva, Dakini, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, Nimanakaya. It means don't take refuge in your ordinary self-formation. Don't take refuge in your habits, in your tendencies, in what you know, because if you rely on what you've already got, you just build up more and more structures. Taking refuge in the mind itself is taking refuge in emptiness. Emptiness is not a thing. So if a thing comes, it's not emptiness. So why are you grasping at the thing? I need something. Who needs something? The mind is empty, and what arises is empty. So as they say, we meditate sky to sky. Open awareness to the open field of the Dharma Dhatu, to the ground spaciousness of experience. Sky to sky, unobstructed. So when a cloud comes, what do you want a cloud for? The cloud passes through the empty sky, but if you hold on to the cloud, you get into formation of more clouds. So whenever something arises as a solution, if you rest on it, you will compact it, because your density and your need and your reliance will squeeze it and make it more solid, like squeezing the water out of some damp cloth. And the more you squeeze the water out, the more dense, the harder the cloth becomes. It loses its pliability. So, when you rely on an arising as if it was reliable, you are cheating yourself. So, in the meditation, again and again, we will find ourselves resting on, fusing with, needing, being fascinated by transient arisings. When that happens, don't worry. As soon as you see it, relax again. Open in the space. Open in the space. Because what you had got caught up in is in space. It hasn't taken you out of space. There is nowhere else to go. You are always in the mandala of the mind of all the Buddhas. That's all there is. But many things arise inside it. Our friends. Well, there are two main aspects to meditation in a simple form. Of course, with visualization, there are many, many different kinds of visualization. But the basic forms of meditation are shamatha and vipassana, or shine and lakton.
And what?
Shine and lakton. So, shine means being peaceful, or abiding peacefully, remaining peaceful. And lakton means the best seeing, or seeing clearly, or seeing how it is. So, on a general level, in shine, we do shine with a fixation. In the fixation can be a neutral external object like a pebble, usually a round pebble, something not too interesting. Or it can be an object with a symbolic significance, like a small statue of the Buddha, where your emotion towards the object acts as an additional support for attention. Or it could be an abstract symbol, like a white letter A with a rainbow-colored light coming out from it. Or, as we know, it can be the sensation of the breath at the nostrils. In all of these situations, you have the object of your attention prepared before you begin. If you're using an external object, usually you keep it about an arm and a half's length in front of you, raised about that high off the ground, and you just let your gaze settle on it. You're not looking at it, staring at it, you're not trying to think about it, but you're just using it as a kind of resting place, that as the gaze rests on the object, you're just kind of a little bit slumped out there you are, just gazing at that. So there's something emptying in the gaze, and yet it gives you a focus. And with the breath, it's a subtle sensation, so you have to stay focused with it. The purpose of doing this kind of practice is to increase the capacity for sustained attention. That is to say, to avoid distraction. Distraction is a problem when we live in the realm of intention. That we want to do things, but we get led astray. We go off in different directions. So the focusing of attention allows a gathering of the various aspects of ourselves so that they have less autonomy. So in the language of psychology, we have self-states, we have sub-personalities, self-aspects, and they all have their own predilections, their likes, dislikes, intentions. And so we are prone to moving in different directions according to the arising of these different parts of ourselves. Therefore, if there is no organizing factor, it's a bit chaotic being a person. We're often all over the place. Now, of course, you can organize yourself by work. by necessity, in which case you have an object that you're focusing on. The problem with that is that a certain aspect of yourself or a certain sub-personality is now being privileged over the others. So if you have to be serious on this work project, there's no space for your playful self, there's no place for your ironic self, and so on. And so you get a kind of imbalancing of the psychological structure, which of course then has a compensatory activity later. So very often people who spend all day in the city of London looking at computers consume large quantities of cocaine in the evening. That's it, because it's too tight. And the Buddha said, not too tight, not too loose. If you go very, very tight, sooner or later it's going to go loose. And if you go very, very loose, sooner or later someone's going to be on their case. You're going to piss people off. So the function is, don't be distracted, but gather your attention on the neutral object, an object which has no particular ally relationship to any of your sub-personalities. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You're not privileging any part of yourself. You're just looking at a very neutral, boring object, essentially. So, in a sense, it's purifying attention of biased intention. Usually, you look in a particular way at something that's attractive. So some good-looking person walks down the street and you track them. Wow, wow. So you see that person more forcibly than somebody who doesn't catch your attention, who doesn't seem so attractive. So the bias of either I like, I want, or ooh, I don't like, these are the kind of two peak experiences in relation to attention. Would you think that's true? And if something's fairly neutral, it's almost invisible. You don't give much attention to it. So Shine is reversing this. It says, if it's interesting, never mind. If it's scary, never mind. Stay on the neutral. Bland, boring, tedious, unrewarding. Cold porridge, followed by cold porridge. So then you think, oh, but I want the waves. I want the labile emotional experience. Cold porridge. So it's a very powerful way of reframing the value system, because excitement is the main way that we antidote the fear of boredom. And the fear of boredom, as we looked earlier, is the kind of warning bell for the ego that there's not enough going on to keep me present as somebody. You've got to keep this show a bit more uppity. And so we go for distraction. So that's a function of Shine with an object of fixation. Then from that we have something you're probably mostly familiar with, which is vipassana with an object. So you take the focused attention and you bring it to the crown of your head, and then you scan down through the body, simply recording what is arising at the various stages. Clearly this is a kind of dualistic investigation. It's like a scanning machine you have in a big hospital now, except you're doing it yourself. You're running this flow of attention through yourself. And the purpose of that is to highlight the delusion of a permanent, substantial body. The body of experience is unpredictable, unreliable, and ungraspable. Because as you go up and down through the body, you get these fluctuations of experience arising and passing. So you go down to the bottom of your feet and then slowly back up, and at each stage you're just noting This is arising, this is arising, this is arising. And then it's gone. The more we do that, what is present is attention, which is constant and even. It's not leaping ahead wondering, oh, I wonder if my knees will still be sore when I get there. It's not going back thinking, oh, that pain in my neck is maybe serious. It's just calm, clear, constant, going down and coming back up. So again, it's a kind of training in boredom. Because what could be exciting, a pleasurable sensation in the body, or what could be fear-inducing, something that can be interpreted as a pain, maybe it's a symptom that something's wrong, I haven't tuned into my body for a while. Neither that expansive, hopeful potential or the fearful, shrinking potential is indulged. We just keep scanning on down, scanning on up. So both are methods of developing equanimity, simply showing, simply being present with what's arising, but they're done in a dualistic way. In both of them, there is an observer and an observed. But that's the beginning one. So we'll do one and then run it into the other in your own time, and then we'll go on to look at it from the Dzogchen point of view. So we sit in a comfortable way. Usually for this kind of practice, the chin is slightly down. You're looking down the line of the nose, so the eyes are a little bit open, but not staring. The tongue is up on the hard palate behind your top teeth. Shoulders are open and dropped and relaxed. If you're sitting cross-legged, you can sit in the Padmasana, lotus position, if not, in a comfortable way. And the breath is slow and easy with the diaphragm. So you sit for a bit, 10 minutes or so, just observing the breath, or you can fixate on, if you're looking down the line of your nose, if you see a mark on the carpet, you can decide on one and have that as your object of focus. And then, in your own time, start to bring the focused attention up to the top of your head and then down, right through your feet and back up again. Okay? So these are two very simple and straightforward practices. The second one in particular is showing the nature of impermanence and the absence of inherent self-nature in the body. It's showing that the body of experience and the medical body and the conceptual body are not the same at all. The body of experience is ungraspable, but it's revelatory. The body shows itself through this arising. And that starts to give us some confidence that although I don't know, as it were, who I am or even what I am, here I am. And that this space of experience will continue to be filled. And so the attempt to shape it and direct it is unnecessary, because what is emerging is transient and interesting in its differentiation. So there's a huge amount of diversity to emergent experience, and yet, because each mode is inseparable from emptiness, there are not many things. So, when we go back to that technical term, prapancha, the polarities, there's not just one thing, nor are there many different things. We can't say all is one and subsume it into something, because the one thing that contains everything is emptiness, and it's not a one or a many. Nor can we say that there are many different diverse phenomena, because the diversity is within the unborn mind, and It's the showing of diversity, but without the inherent self-nature that would make it truly diverse. So there aren't many different things. So this kind of meditation helps us to appreciate that. Now, the basic practices of Dzogchen also fall within this understanding of Shine and Hlakton. Shine, sitting peacefully, well, the most peaceful way to be is to rest in the primordial purity of the mind, in Kada, that from the very beginning the mind has been undefiled, not mixed, means not many, not this covered with that or this infected with that, but just simple. The mind is simply open. It doesn't have anything else, it's just open awareness. So when we do the practice, we sit and we're open. We're sitting peacefully, whatever comes, comes, whatever goes, goes. This is the heart of Shine or Shamatha. Undisturbed. We don't, except it's a shamatha without a fixation, because you're not starting with a point that you know you come back to. There's no, if you get lost, you don't see some searchlight beaming on the mountain or some lighthouse on the cliff so you can direct your attention. We relax and open, and if we get distracted and caught up in stuff, as soon as you become aware of that, you simply release. And here you are. There's nowhere to go back to, because the focus in Dzogchen is to be with whatever is arising. So we don't know in advance what we're going to focus on. So in that sense, this is shamatha without a fixation. It doesn't have an object that we lock onto, but we are present with whatever is arising. With this style in the practice, the main focus is on the emptiness. That is to say, on non-involvement. Because when we, as we've looked many times now, when we get involved, we get filled up with the stuff. Although it's going by, it seems to give us a density and a substantiality. So, just relaxed and open. Nothing. Many movements, many appearances are occurring, but we are indifferent. This is the wisdom side of stupidity. Stupidity says, I don't care, I don't care. I don't care. I am not involved. So it's like that. Why would I get involved? No need. So this is very, very peaceful. Turmoil is going on, but it's nothing to do with me. So in this way you start to have a presence which is impersonal. When we have a personal presence, we are present with our personalities, our likes, dislikes, turns, and so on. And that easily moves us towards involvement, because that's what the personality is made of, involvement. But an impersonal attention, or rather an impersonal presence, is just open. Whatever comes, comes. It doesn't matter. It's the indifference of equanimity, not the indifference of being shut down or shut off. We are present, but there is no consequence for awareness in the quality of what is arising. It's not improved by what we would take to be beautiful or interesting arisings, and it's not demeaned or cast down by what we would take to be negative arisings. So in that sense, it's the great equality. And this is technical terms that you will see a lot in Dzogchen, that everything is even. So, and this links to what we looked at earlier today. What is arising is a potential which is evoked into presenting as a particularization of qualities as being something as such by our own mental operation. The movement of the mind is causing this formation to appear real for me. So if the mind is not moving, the appearance remains empty. The possible filling mind, the possible filled object are empty. The possible filling object and the possible filled mind are also empty. So whether you're going subject to object or object to subject, both are empty. So this is Shine from the Dzogchen perspective. Then if we just alter our focus slightly, something is occurring. Things are always occurring. This is the movement of the mind. This movement never ceases. And it's not movement in the mind, but it's the movement of the unmoving mind. Just as the mirror, if the mirror's on the wall and 100 people walk past it, there's a lot of movement in the mirror, but the mirror doesn't move. So in the same way, awareness is hospitable, is open and welcoming to many kinds of movement, but it doesn't move with them. It doesn't lock in with them. It's not conjoined. It is non-dual. So the movement of the mind, in the mind, as the mind, is the natural self-display of the clarity of the mind, and this is referred to as Lundrup, as the effortless arising or instant presence of the potential of the empty space of the mind. So we're just sitting. It doesn't matter what happens. So we're indifferent, and yet we're not blind, dead, and stupid. Differentiation, patterning, shows itself. So there is the precision of the patterning of whatever is arising, the sounds outside the room, people's bodies moving, and so on. But as illusion, when you look at a rainbow, if it's a clear rainbow, the colors are very precise. They're not all mixed up. Very precise differentiation. So in the same way, we're here in the room, things are arising, and each thing is exquisitely, precisely just what it is, as appearance. It's not the appearance of something, it's the appearance of nothing. And that's the major kind of awakening that we need to have with our practice. Because in normal terms, when something appears, it's the appearance of something. You hear a noise, what was that? Because you want to find out what was the cause that led to that noise arriving here. Whereas now we know, it's always emptiness. What was that? Emptiness. Emptiness has 1,000 presentations. So you always know it's just empty. So there's no hopes and fears going up and down, but there is a precise attention. So the quality of the noise is very precise, which is why when you're walking down the road in the city and there's a lot of cars going by, you can hear the cars. And you can hear when someone's driving very fast, so you might step away from the edge of the curb. That would be very wise. You don't need to be frightened. Oh my God, there's a car coming. I could die. What would my mother say? Just the noise and the body moves. It's a seamless flow. So in non-duality, we are articulated into the world as part of the world, and therefore the movement of the world moves us. You don't need to have a cognitive processing to come to that conclusion. It's very quick. It's like when you have an Olympic skier going down a fast slope. They're not thinking about what they're doing. they have a seamless flow of perception and movement, because there is no time to think. When we think about it, we interrupt flow, and then we take the whole burden onto ourselves. This is why being the isolated ego is so exhausting, because it's all up to me, and there are variable interpretations and uncertainty. What should I do? That's very, very exhausting. Where if you just stay connected in the flow of non-duality, life just happens. Not so difficult. So this is vipassana, because remember, vipassana means seeing clearly. So what we're seeing very precisely is the differentiation of the clarity of emptiness. Like the rainbow in the sky, the clear light goes in through the raindrops, and the sunlight's coming at a particular angle, and that angle hitting the refractive index of the water droplets generates as the rainbow. So you can do the same with a crystal. So you can cut a diamond to be very brilliant or just average. So you do that by shaping the angle of the facets to catch the light and distribute the color in different ways. So that's what's happening all the time, is that the clarity, which is just empty, we're here, open, that clarity, without being changed, refracts into these possibilities of manifestation. So the basic clarity is called rigpa, or awareness, completely open. And when it shines into the crystal of the potential of manifestation, it's refracted out as all the diverse phenomena of the world. And this is Slundrup, the instant presencing of all the complexity in the manner of a dream. There is no creator. Nobody made this happen. It's not done by God or the devil or human intention. It's just effortlessly arising and effortlessly vanishing. So this is a seamless process. And this is vipassana without fixation. Because you're being present with what is manifesting. You're not entering into judgment about it. You're allowing it to show itself as it is. Just as when with the fixation you scan through the body, you're aware maybe tight in the shoulder and then burning in the belly and different kinds of first level manifesting sensations. It is what it is. You don't say good or bad, and you see that many different things are arising in the body. This is now being extended into the open awareness without limits. So the whole world is inside the mind, manifesting as aeroplanes, birds, sunsets, trees, electric light. But of course it's none of these things, because these are all just names put by mind. If you don't put the name, what you have is the immediacy of the presence. This is clarity. And when you get used to the clarity, you find that the need for conceptual interpretation becomes less and less. In our general language, we'd say you trust your intuition more. You don't have to think about it. You have a sense. And the more you can trust that deep sense, which is the quality of non-duality, of course you don't have to think. So if you don't have to think, you don't have to extract significant features. You don't have to profile out of how things are. So you stay close to the lived topology as it's emerging, and you act. And the action flows from the connectivity, not from working out a game plan or an agenda or an intention. So that will be the difference.
Can you just clarify the difference in this between Shine and Lundrup again?
Yeah, so the Shine, the peaceful, links to the Kada, the primordial purity. So nothing is, there is no stain, which is just emptiness. It's open and empty. Nothing which passes through the mind leaves a mark. So the sound of the bell, if it's just sound, there's nothing to do with it. If you turn it into a bell, a church bell, then you can start to build something up. Because the more you define what something is, the more you start to feel polarized positions. So the bell, it's a bell in a Catholic church. I'm a Scottish Protestant. What are these fucking Catholics doing here? They should have all been killed. You had 100 years war, you didn't manage to annihilate all of them. What sort of fucking Protestants are you? Huh? So clearly that kind of hot thinking arises very, very easily. We just had it in Ireland. A lot of people were blown up exactly on the basis of that. You identify the object, the subject goes into a parallel identification, and it becomes hot and solid at the same time. That's very dangerous in the world. So, kada is allowing the sound without seeing it as something, because as soon as you see it as a sound and you take up a position, it's as if it's marked you. But if the sound as sound is passing through, it's showing itself. You're not dead, but it's not showing itself as something, because when something shows itself as something, it's being what you tell it is. It's your own projected identification. So that's on the side of just open. And then, without really moving at all, because it's not really two separate things, there's a side of, here is the manifestation moving through the emptiness, and because I'm open to the emptiness of the emergence, I can pay more and more attention, if you like, though it's not an intentional attention. I'm more aware of the details, the particularization of what's emerging as the display of emptiness. So I can have endless complexity, three-dimensional, multi-dimensional, simultaneous complexity, and it's fine. It's all going on. Because I don't have to sort it out. As soon as you get into conceptual organization, you're having to have hierarchies of value, think, what do I need to deal with first? What do I want? What do I not want? It's very, very busy. And because that conceptual thought, like speaking language, is linear progressive, it's in a straight line. But the world is not a straight line. The world is this unbelievable immediate complexity. That's really what Fundrup means. So the only way to stay open with the complexity is to be open. And as soon as you close into trying to make sense of it, you've lost it. Because why did you need to make sense of it? It already is here. It is what it is. Sound. Yeah, but what sort of sound? Why do you want to know? What kind of car makes that sound? Are you a car dealer? What kind of nerdy preoccupation is this? Do you really want to have a mind that tedious that you can identify what aeroplane is flying overhead by the sound of the engine? Huh? Look at all the unnecessary, excessive mental energy you put into identifying things you don't need to know. It's just sound. And then you're here, very open. You don't fall off your seat. You don't forget what day of the week it is. In fact, your mind is brighter and clearer by having less cluttering knowledge. Information doesn't make you bright. You're present by being present, not by accumulating a database whereby you can better process what is arising in terms of your interpretive template. That is really to have the world upside down. So that would be the difference. Okay, so now we do this a little bit. Again, you just sit, you're present, and you can gently, in your own time, just imagining you have a kind of gentle fulcrum And you can tilt towards just here and oh. Here and oh. Nothing, everything. Nothing, everything. They are not two, but by having more sense of the openness, there's space for everything without fixating on something. And so the normal discrimination, do I need more of this or less of this, becomes less of a demand inside our mental arisings. Any questions about this before we begin? Okay, so we sit like this for a while. So in that way you can come to experience that although a lot is manifesting, it's not a problem. So in the text you can often read that it says mitokpa, without thoughts, natok drandralva, untouched or unconnected with thoughts. Now normally we do that by separation, so my left hand and my right hand don't touch each other at the moment. So the space in between them stops them from touching. But of course it increases the duality of the things which are not in touch. But in the Dzogchen text, when it says without thoughts, it doesn't mean that there aren't thoughts there. When the reflection is in the mirror is not touched by the reflection, although the reflection is in the mirror. When you touch something, you leave a trace. That's what detective books are based on, isn't it? There's fingerprints on the gun or fingerprints on the bottle. Everything we do leaves some kind of trace. And now with mobile phones, people realize they leave traces of themselves all over the place. So activity leaves ghost-like impressions. But that's not the case for the mirror, because the mirror is fully showing this reflection, and then it's gone without a trace. So you can say the mirror is full of the reflection, but not touched by the reflection. And so the mirror is free of reflections. So if you hold that image, and then we think the mind is free of thoughts. The thoughts pass through the mind. They don't touch the mind because the mind's nature is emptiness. So no matter how many thoughts arise, the mind is free of thoughts. Which means you don't have to work to try to dampen down thoughts, because we need thoughts to live in the world. That's why they say in Dzogchen, when you do the practice, life continues as normal. Maybe you have family, or you have work to do, you have many things to do. All of these activities go on, but they're flowing through the space of the mind. They are the energy or the display of the mind, but they don't limit or contaminate the mind. And that's the non-duality of primordial purity and effortlessly arising. And now, I hope you all experience effortlessly sleeping.